Want to improve your quilting skills? Join Quilt Class for just $15 a month. You'll get a new pattern, step-by-step demos, and access to a supportive quilting community. Learn, create, and connect, all from the comfort of your home. Sign up today. Okay, so we have made it to the half square triangle chapter of the Dilly Dally quilt. So the next several blocks are going to be all based on half square triangles. We are going to be using some of the skills we've already learned, but most of these blocks are going to be half square triangles all over the place. Half square triangles are probably one of the most common blocks, units you're going to run into in quilt making, and they are appearing in traditional and modern quilts. They're very versatile. They can be used to create almost anything. Think star points, pinwheels, chevrons, diamonds. They are a staple in quilt making, and it doesn't matter if you're looking at a beginner pattern or a more advanced pattern. They're common everywhere you go. All right, so half square triangles are formed when you sew two squares together on the diagonal and then cut them apart. They differ from snowballs. Instead of sewing directly down the middle, you always sew a scant 1/4 inch from the very middle. All right, and you want to use the scant because anytime you're trimming something down, it's just better to go with a scant 1/4 inch. So all of these blocks, I'm going to be sewing with that scant 1/4 inch seam. So we're going to be making these a little bit bigger, just a teensy weensy bigger than we need them, and then trim them all down. What's so great about that is that you always end up with the exact size half square triangle that you need. And that's why they're one of my favorites. They're always right. They're not hard. They're not difficult. They're not finicky like a snowball. And we're going to be making them 2 at a time. All right, so there's 2 steps to half square triangles. There's the step of preparing and sewing it, and then there's the step of pressing and trimming. And the first step is going to be the exact same as snowballs. We have 3 options to use. We can either draw lines, we can use diagonal seam tape or basic washi tape, or we can use that laser. I'm going to show you all 3 of those. And then we're going to get into the trimming and pressing. So I want to show you 2 different ways. I want to show you one way if you have the bare minimum in supplies and quilting, and then I want to show you with a specialty ruler. All right, so here we are. We have 2 squares. It is always 2 squares, and it always gives you 2 half square triangles, the method that we're going to be using in this class. Now, there are a lot of other methods of half square triangle making that can change how many you get. So know that this is not the only way, but this is the way that we use in Dilly Dally. All right, so to start out, you're going to flip one of your squares right side down, and you're going to draw a line. And this is probably your simplest way. So right down on the diagonal, we're going to draw that line. So we're splitting the corner with our ruler and draw. So just like that. The major difference between this and snowballs is that these are so much more forgiving. You have room to make errors, not get it exactly right, and you'll still be fine with it. Whereas snowballs, any wrong move, or even if you did everything right, you still could end up with errors. So I like these better. But just like snowballs, drawing lines on a bunch of squares can end up taking you a lot of time, especially if you have a whole quilt of half square triangles. So not my favorite method, but definitely the easiest method. All right. So at this point, you would put these 2 together, right sides together, put the 2 just like that. Right? And then you would sew a 1/4 inch from that drawn line. So you can use your needle plate, right? If you have a 1/4 inch foot, you would use that. And I've got a scant 1/4 inch foot right here, so that's what I would use. Right? So I would put my foot right on the edge of that line. And sew. Then different from snowballs is half square triangles, you would flip this over and do the opposite side as well. So you'd end up with something like that. And then I would cut on this diagonal line, and that would give me my 2 half square triangles. So that is far and away the easiest method, but it is probably the most time-consuming method. The next method would be using your tape. And you've got two choices. You've got diagonal seam tape or just basic washi tape. One of the good things about the diagonal seam tape, in my opinion, is that you can use the same tape placement for a lot of different units or blocks in quilting. So for example, in the last chapter, we did snowballs, and we used that red line to keep our corner on when we're snowballing, and that gave you snowball corner. But you could use the same placement for it, but just swap to the black line, and you could use it for half square triangles and flying geese. So that's one of the good things about the diagonal seam tape. The thing I don't like about it is because it has these side edges from the black line, it's not the easiest tape to place. It's much easier to tape this and just use the edge of it. But with basic washi tape, you have to keep changing your placement depending on whether you're making snowballs or half square triangles and flying geese. So they both have their pros and cons. Let's walk through the tape, and I'm not going to go into as much detail as I went into it with snowballs because we've already kind of covered that. I'll start out with my 1/4 inch line on one of the lines of my needle plate, and when I'm putting the ruler on my needle plate, I want to make sure it's in the exact same place of the line down here and up here. That's how I know that I have my ruler straight. So I'm going to use the lines of my ruler to get it into place. All right, and then I'm going to pull the tape. Try not to bump the ruler. And now I can bump the ruler. Let me just check it one more time. Ideally, this black line is right there on my 1/4 inch sewn line, and it looks pretty good except for down here. Let me just check it one more time. Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, so now I'm not drawing a line, but I am still doing the same step of putting right sides together. So right sides together, and since this right down here is a 1/4 inch, I would keep my corner on the inside of it. So like, you know, maybe even not quite midway, but because I'm trying to achieve a scant 1/4 inch seam. So maybe right there. So my corner of my unit needs to stay in about the same distance away from that black line for me to be able to get a scant 1/4 inch seam. And it's going to look something like this. I would start sewing. All right, and I'm keeping that corner right there, the same place. Cut my thread, right? Flip it over and do the same thing for the 1/4 inch or the scant 1/4 inch of the other side of the very center. So now I'm keeping this corner right there in the same place. All right, so that would be using diagonal seam tape. The next step in the process would be for me to cut corner to corner, making, you know, the 2 half square triangles. All right, so let's move to basic washi tape. Now this is going to be easier to place. And I'm going to put my ruler, I'm going to drop my feed dogs just a little bit so that, or I'm not dropping them, I'm just lowering them just a little bit so that my ruler can go up under here without any kind of, you know, way it don't bump. But I'm going to put the edge of my ruler where I feel like the scant. Now on my machine, I have a scant 1/4 inch line. This line right here is a scant. So I want to line up this ruler up here and down here with that line. Since I have a scant 1/4 inch foot, I could actually just bump my ruler up to the foot. That's another way I could do this just because of the specialty foot. But then I would take the tape, and without bumping the ruler, I'm going to lay this tape with the tape and the ruler butted up against each other. And just be gentle with it because you don't want to move that ruler. All right, now I can move the ruler and then firmly set the tape. So now I've got my 2 squares. I'm going to put them right sides together, and we again want to sew a scant 1/4 inch from the very center. So I'm watching down here. This is where my eyes are. I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to keep this corner right there on that edge of the tape. All right, cut my thread, flip it over again, do the same thing for the other side. So it ends up looking like that. And then I would cut with my rotary cutter and ruler. I'd cut right down the middle of this thing and end up with 2 half square triangles. And I'm going to show you the cutting in a minute. So we're getting there. We have one more way to show you before that. I'm just going to get this up. One more method, and this method is going to be using the laser. All right, so the laser is right here. There it is. And I've got this little clicky thing that turns it on. And you can see it right there. I've actually got it set up for half square triangles already because I was making my practice blocks. But let's set it up together. So I'm just going to move this, you know, in the wrong position. And you can see it. The thing about this laser is I can use it for all kinds of sewing. I can turn it completely sideways. So there is so much I can do with this thing, but mostly I use it for snowballs and half square triangles. All right, so the laser comes with a guide. So I'm going to set that up. I'm going to drop my needle, and then this guide just kind of butts up against the needle. And I like to do it with 2 fingers. Pick up the foot, push with 2 fingers, drop the foot, and let go more gently than that. I'm going to let go gently because I don't want to move the guide, because I could have it sideways a little bit and not even know it. So I do want to do that really carefully. This blue line is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right. And what I want to put my laser just kind of, you know, on the inside of that line. So I'm going to move the laser, and I want to make sure that the laser is straight. That way I'm not sewing, you know, at the wrong angle. I want to sew, you know, at 45 degrees. So I need to make sure that that laser is the same distance away from that blue line up here and down here. And that's kind of tricky. So I definitely don't think that the laser is the easiest method, but I do think that it's the most efficient. So, you know, you set it and you're done. There's no tape, there's no drawing lines. It's just boom, there it is. And it looks like I'm a little bit closer up here than I am down here. I'm just going to keep fiddling with it until I get it right. And I feel like it's the same distance away from the blue line, and I think it is. So I can move this, grab my 2 squares, right sides together. All right, you can see the laser. And what I want to do is keep that laser splitting this corner. So my eyes are right here. Cut my thread, flip it around, and I'm going to do the same thing for this side. Looks like this. And then it's going to give me those half square triangles. So just like this. All right, so now that we've established how to sew them, let's talk about pressing and cutting. And again, you've got 2 different options. We're going to do it the basic way, and then we're going to use it the specialty ruler way. The first step before moving forward is to set those seams. So we're just going to put our iron just like that. All right, and then we're going to go to the cutting mat. Is we've got to cut all these in half. We've got to cut them all into half square triangles. You're going to take your ruler's edge, split the corner. So a little bit different from snowballs, we're using the ruler's edge. We're going to put that edge from corner to corner and cut, giving you half square triangles. Now is decision making time. If you're using a specialty ruler, you're going to keep going. If you're using a basic ruler, we need to go press these first. So I'm going to set 2 of these in each of these sizes. I'm going to set these aside for specialty ruler, and we're going to use these for basic ruler. Now here's where they start differing. Basic ruler, we need to go press these. So let's go press them together. All right, so pressing them, I am going to press all of the seams open. Always, always press triangles open. It just gives you a better block, better unit. I'm going to slip my finger into the seam and press. All right. It's going to look just like this. I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these. All right, so any ruler will do that has the size that you want to trim these to, and we're going to trim these to 2 inches. So I'm going to take my washi tape. I'm going to put it right there on the 2-inch line. And the washi tape serves no other purpose but to give my eyes somewhere to look at quickly, where I don't have to keep staring at that ruler. My eyes get blurry staring at rulers, so this is just to speed up my eye looking process. All right. So it's going to look like that on the 2-inch line. And then we're going to take one of these half square triangles. And there's something important on your ruler here that's very, very important. And it's not that pink dot. That pink dot does not matter at all. What matters is the 45-degree line. 45-degree line should be marked 45 degrees on your ruler, but if it's not marked, it's the one that goes from corner to corner. So you can see it right there. I want that line on that seam. So I'm going to line up the 2-inch line right here on this corner, and I'm going to line up that yellow 45-inch line on my seam. So take a minute and get it right. And if you've got any kind of wonkiness going on, you don't have to have the edge of your patchwork does not have to be exactly on that 2-inch line, because we're going to trim the other side as well. So you can even move it a little bit more in the ruler, making it not on the edge of the patchwork. As long as that 45-degree line is sitting on that seam, that's your most important thing here. So once we have it in place, we're going to cut and cut, right? I don't think I cut all the way. All right. Then you'll rotate around. Now you're going to line up the 2-inch line on this edge, because this is accurately cut. And you're going to line up the 45-degree line on the seam. And take all the time you need to do this, but when you have it, put some weight down and cut and cut. All right, and that's how you trim up half square triangles with the basic ruler. So very similar to everything we've already been doing in this class. All right, so that's that ruler. And you know, of course, for any of these other sizes, I would just move the tape and trim away. So just exactly the same. All right, but let's move to the specialty ruler. And there are a lot of different specialty rulers, but this one is my favorite. And the major difference for this one is that I trim them before I press them. So instead of going and pressing all these first, we're just going to stick with our regular ones right here. All right, so I'm going to take one of these, and this one's going to be trimmed to 3.5 inches. But I would just keep it like this, no pressing. Just want to make sure you get that, no pressing. And then I'm going to find the number on here that I want to trim it to, which is 3.5. There's my 3.5 line, and it looks exactly like a stitch line. There it is. Ah, my finger keeps going in the wrong place. So I'm going to put that stitch line on the ruler right there on my actual stitch line. All right, and then you should see fabric, excess fabric over here and excess fabric over here. If you don't see it in both sides, move your ruler down a little bit until you've got it fairly centered up. I've got about the same amount of fabric excess on both sides of this ruler. All right, so get the ruler in the right place, put some weight down with your hand, trim, and trim. There we go. All right, so then we cut off these. So now we need to cut off these little, what they call dog ears. I always call them tails, but some people call them dog ears. And to do that, I just eyeball it. All right, I know some specialty rulers will have the spot on them where you can trim them off, but this part really doesn't matter that much. You just want to trim them at around a 45-degree angle. So I just come in like that. And sometimes my angle is a little bit different, but I want to do that for both sides. And that will reduce bulk, you know, in those seam allowances. With the ruler, we ended up with the dog ears cut off. So this is a tiny bit of a little extra step. And at this point of the specialty ruler, we would go and press this seam open and get a nice half square triangle that way. Both of these methods will get you the exact same thing. The only difference is that for this method, I had to buy a specialty ruler, but when I trim it, I'm trimming both sides. Whereas this one, I use the ruler that I have, and I had to trim one side, and then I had to rotate around and trim the other side. Only you know what you want to do. So definitely use the method that you want to. This particular specialty ruler is not expensive. We have them in the shop if you want it. I really do like it. But again, I'm perfectly comfortable doing this if I didn't have this ruler.